Bobby, thanks for coming on, and we're super excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you wouldn't mind giving us some background of who you are and how you became who you are at Record Rack.
I was born and raised in Texas, Central Texas, and I went to college at Angelo State University, got a master's degree from there, animal science, range and wildlife management background, and then went straight to work for Cargill.
What do you think the biggest difference in Record Rack over the past 20 some odd years is?
If you're feeding the same thing you were feeding 20 years ago, you're way behind the curve. There weren't really supplemental proteins that were designed specifically for exotics. I mean, we just had deer protein, basically. Right. And most feed companies at that time, when I first came on, it was their 20% range cube made in a small pellet, thrown into a sack with a deer on it, and they called it a deer feed.
Right.
Not the case with Record Rack. I mean, they actually did their research. We have a nutrition lab, and I mean, we have a formulation system that's specific for white-tailed deer. So,
well, isn't it just like a set it and forget it type thing? It's protein, right? Like just put a protein out there and it's going to work.
No, that's definitely not the case. The feed that they're putting in those feeders is basically just substituting habitat. It's not a true supplement to their habitat or improving anything. When it comes to nutrition, feed's not a silver bullet. Basically just throwing money at a feed program that isn't correct, like throwing your money in the ditch a lot of times.
Thank you again for tuning in to this week's podcast. Again, I am asking that anyone who is watching this will subscribe, like, and comment. I know I sound like influencers, but again, the more influence we have on this app, the more guests we can have on the podcast. So again, anyone who comments below, you'll be put into a drawing for $10 million. Just kidding. Anyone who comments below, we will put you in a drawing for a Droptine Studios hat. Thank you for listening. I think you'll enjoy this episode. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Bobby Deeds from Record Rack, and today we're just going to talk about how we can help figure out how to build a relationship with your feed company or your nutritionist. Bobby, thanks for coming on, and we're super excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we just kind of wanted to give some background. I'm sure everybody, as we discussed, kind of knows who you are in the state of Texas, but if you wouldn't mind giving us some background of who you are and how you became who you are at Record Rack.
Well, my name is Bobby Deeds. I've been with Record Rack going on, come May will be 21 years. I originally hired on with them as a sales rep. I graduated, I was born and raised in Texas, Central Texas, and I went to college at Angelo State University, got a master's degree from there, animal science, range and wildlife management background, and then went straight to work for Cargill. And through that time, I've always had a passion for the outdoors when it came to deer hunting and white-tailed deer, exotics, all of that. Just because of where I grew up. I mean, I grew up on a ranch we hunted on. We managed for white-tailed deer. And then, once I got into college, nobody knows what they want to do when they go to college, right? So got into the animal science piece, found the range and wildlife deal. And was like, well, if I can make a living doing this, then that's what we're going to do. So just kind of started from there. And really, and it was about 2005, was the first year when I went to work for Cargill, and Cargill owns Record Rack. But when I went to work for Record Rack, though, and it was kind of when feeding deer was really starting to become cool, I guess.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just because we started to figure out we can do more than just feed these animals. We can also make them bigger. Right. So that was, when it really started to blow up, I guess. And Record Rack had just kind of became a thing. The brand actually launched in the early 2000s, where, it was under the Sportsman's Choice ACO brand, which was been there since the 80s. I mean, they've been doing it longer than ever. But that's just really when I came into the company and the whole industry as a whole, deer breeding was taking off, high fence hunting, and even low fence deer management, just figuring out how we can feed deer better, exotics, and make them bigger. So as that opportunity grew, Cargill and Record Rack realized that. So then that being my passion, and, they just said, well, here you go, basically. We had a wildlife specialist at the time who mentored me, a man named Lewis Etzel, who, I value that guy's more than anything, just because I learned so much from him. Because the one thing about wildlife that's been true more than anything, I don't care where you went to college, you don't learn this stuff in a classroom.
Right.
You learn it out boots on the ground.
Absolutely.
And, I've learned more about dealing with people, the actual end users, the ranchers, and it's a constantly evolving deal. That's what I love about it. So, been blessed enough to be able to be with the same company since I graduated, and with the growing industry and a growing business. So just been truly blessed to be able to live where I want to live and do what I want to do. So
yeah, no, that's amazing. I mean, there's been so much change, a lot, especially bringing exotics into the play, and they've become a major player in general in Texas. But one question I want to ask is, today's episode is brought to you by Arns Ranch and Wildlife. If you're looking for someone to manage your land, bring up your profit margin, or just take things off your plate, I personally recommend Callan Arns with Arns Ranch and Wildlife. Visit their website or contact Callan today. What do you think, since you've been with the company pretty much almost since conception of Record Rack, what do you think the biggest difference in Record Rack over the past 20 some odd years is?
I mean, there's huge changes just year to year, because I mean, that's the thing. If you're feeding the same thing you were feeding 20 years ago, you're way behind the curve.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a constantly evolving deal. And that's the thing I love the most about it. I love the research side of it. I love the nutrition side of it. And I love how we learn something new every day. So that's probably the biggest change is just in the diets. If you looked at the diets, we're just talking about supplemental protein feed, for example. Right. There weren't really supplemental proteins that were designed specifically for exotics. I mean, we just had deer protein, basically. Right. And most feed companies at that time, when I first came on, it was their 20% range cube made in a small pellet, thrown into a sack with a deer on it, and they called it a deer feed. Right. Not the case with Record Rack. I mean, they actually did their research. We have a nutrition lab, and I mean, we have a formulation system that's specific for white-tailed deer. So that was where we kind of differentiated ourselves out the gate. And then since then, we've just compounded that every year, trying to be a leader, whether it's on the energy side, palatability side, mineral side, functional ingredient side, but you name it. I could talk about 50 different things that we do nutritionally that are different than everybody else. And that's really is how kind of often the brush you can get with some of this functional ingredient stuff, because the one thing about I found out that differentiates the deer guys from the domestic livestock guys is they're early adapters. I mean, when it comes to, hey, this might add an extra time to that deer, hey, let's try it.
Absolutely.
But you can also, everybody's only got a certain amount of expendable income, so it has to be feasible, and you got to put your money where your mouth is. So That's really how I think the biggest thing that's changed is we actually figure these ingredients out, or figure out what we're going to put into a ration, and be sure we're going to see a response before we try to charge you for it. So that's really the difference, is what we do 3 years prior to launching anything. It's not something that we came up with last week and said, well, let's try this. Right. So that's the biggest thing I would really think is just the science behind it now versus when we first started. Because at first we didn't have a whole lot of stuff to go off of. Right. I mean, but now that we've been doing this with higher energy diets, and we've got 20 years of feed data on a lot of ranches that we work really tightly with. So that's you can really start to move the needle a lot more the more data you get, and that's just what we're seeing. Yeah, and it's interesting, especially in the antlered, cervids, they only grow out once a year. Right. And once they're done, that's a long process to trust someone that just tried something last weekend and is asking you, but that might put you back a couple years if you just put something out and you're going, hey, wasn't that deer supposed to get bigger? Mm-hmm. Hey, wasn't this feed supposed to make their body condition better? And so, and I guess kind of implementing that is, you said it a little bit earlier, but like the people who, if you're feeding the same thing you did 20 years, or what I run into a lot of, like, people ask me, and I'm an idiot, so I don't know why they ask me, but they say like, well, isn't it just like a set it and forget it type thing? It's protein, right? Like, just put a protein out there and it's going to work. So what would you say to that? No, that's definitely not the case. And that's usually the first thing I get onto a ranch, and I'm not saying we're the only people who know how to make deer feed, but the majority of them that are out there, the feed that they're putting in those feeders is basically just substituting habitat. It's not a true supplement to their habitat or improving anything. Basically, if they took that supplement away, their average Boone and Crockett score, their average body condition score, those harvested animals or the animals that are out there, period, doesn't change. So basically just throwing money at a feed program that isn't correct, like throwing your money in the ditch a lot of times. So, and you got to have records and things like that. But the biggest, I guess, hole a lot of people fall in is, well, I'm feeding XYZ feed, and they've got a picture of a 200-inch deer on it, or they put a post on social media where, hey, look, this ranch feeds this feed, so if I feed it, I'm going to have a 200-inch deer too.
Right.
And that's just not how it works.
Right.
So explaining that's a trick.
Well, and I'm in the marketing business, and I think there are some other feed companies out there that are fairly new that are good at marketing, but it's funny how they can even switch for a year, and then out of nowhere they're going, look what we did. It happened all in 1 year. And I mean, I'm not going to say any names, but it's just one of those aspects where people are easily fooled. And I think there's too much education out there, but most people don't know which education is correct and which one's just good marketing. Yeah,
and it just shows how effective social media is, to be honest. But I mean, when it comes to nutrition, feed's not a silver bullet, or nutrition isn't. I mean, I can take a ranch that's managed well from a population standpoint, habitat standpoint, and everything else, and then I put them on a good nutrition program, the right kind of feed that and it's going to change year to year because your habitat is dependent on what? Rainfall, right? Right. So depending on what your habitat's doing is how we adjust our ration to be sure we're doing it as cost effectively as possible. But the biggest thing that you got to worry about, though, when you're just putting feed out is whether or not you're going to get a response and whether or not they're going to eat it. But, just because, like I said, that they show a certain deer on social media that it came out of this part of the state, and on some of those ranches, you could put cardboard out and they'd have 200-inch deer. Right. So it tricks a lot of people into thinking, well, if I feed that, I'll see the same thing, but they really forget it's just one piece of the pie. And really, I try to explain it to most people like this. Managing deer is basically like it's like a chair you're sitting in. It's got 4 legs, right? So you've got genetics, you've got management, you've got nutrition, and you've got management. So those other 3 parts are just as important as the nutrition part. And if you're missing the mark on one of the other ones, then it doesn't matter what you feed. Right. So you got to constantly improve on the other 3 while you're improving the nutrition piece, and it all goes up. But you can just, have a hole in the genetics management side of things and just go throw all the money, the best feed in the world at it, and we're not going to move the bar. Right. So it's all cumulative, basically. Yeah, because that's what we travel all over just like y'all do, but we'll talk to ranches out in East Texas that have low fence places, and they're like, we can't get them to get bigger. I'm like, yeah, that's by God's design. Yeah. You can't get a 200-inch deer. I'm sure one guy's going to comment and be like, well, yeah, I did once in the 40s. And it's like, okay, well, all the people out there right now, I hardly ever see or hear about big deer in East Texas. Right. When they start going, well, I shot 120 pound, not 120 inch. Well, that's because you have small antlers. Right. Yeah. But you take that same perspective down south, like you said, there's just some monsters rolling down there that have never even seen supplemental feed. Oh, yeah. No, you get down there in the triangle where, all they need is a little rain, and they're going to have some giant deer. They don't have to feed. And the thing about it, even though they don't have to, it can still help them, and even in that part of the world, just because a good true supplement basically takes whatever Mother Nature's given you and then makes it better, more digestible. And that's kind of the secret in the sauce with Record Rack. It's not just the protein, fat, and fiber, what you see on the tag. It's the functional ingredients that we put in there that allow them to get more, not only in the feed, but of what the habitat's producing. Right. Because, and again, I asked this out of ignorance because I truly don't know, but isn't it true that like a deer can only absorb so much protein and so much, and I guess I don't even know how to ask it properly because it's not even on my notes, but can you kind of speak to that as at a certain point it's just wasted, isn't it? Well, a lot of people get hung up on crude protein, and I'm going to go ahead and bust a bubble right here that a lot of people and a lot of feed companies have hung their hat on. Why do we have 20% deer protein? And the number one reason is, what's the most common cattle supplement that's out there? 20% range cube. So feed companies took their 20% range cube, made that a deer feed, then, okay, well, everybody just thinks we need 20% deer feed as well. Right. And I'm not saying that 20% is bad. If you've got, below average habitat, like I said, it's cumulative. If we're like right now, the toughest time of year when we're wanting to put body condition and everything's deficient on everything and our habitat's depleted, then yeah, I'm going to want to feed something that's a little higher protein. Or sometimes if it's really green and they fall off on consumption, they're still going to, utilize some of it. So I want a little bit higher there. So, but getting hung up on crude protein is a big mistake. The number one thing that we're doing with supplementing protein is we're supplementing limiting amino acids. Like I mean, you could put boot leather into a ration and hit 20% protein if you wanted to. So it's not the crude protein level, it's what actual protein sources are. So there's 11 different limiting amino acids, and we formulate to all of them, but the two most limiting are lysine and methionine. So really, when we're talking about a ration, if you look at it, if you're just looking at a feed tag, I would want something that at least guarantees amino acids, because crude protein, one protein source versus another, isn't it just because one's 20 and so is this one? That's not the same.
Right.
So, and to your question though, as far as if you're supplementing feeding a ranch and they have the right amount of feeders, for your deer density, typically I recommend 16%, just because on a diet where they have enough feed, your population's correct, you're only going to typically see, and this is on ranches that have been feeding deer for 40 years,
right,
that we've taken, that always fed 20%. We took them to 16. The only thing that changed was their feed bill. So proven that you can only utilize a certain percentage. And if 20% did you better, every deer breeder in the state would be feeding 20% deer protein. But what do they feed? They feed a 14 to 16% protein ration, because they can't utilize above that. We tried it. So you're just throwing protein on the ground at a certain point.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's where each person wants to just ask the question, well, what protein should I feed? But there's such a plethora of questions that go into that, of what's your objective as a ranch? What is your long-term goal, short-term goals? Because even if it's just establishing a pattern for a deer on a high fence or low fence that goes, well, he knows he can stop here and get a snack. Mm-hmm. That's a much different objective than, hey, I want to let deer grow to be 8 years old and to go to their highest potential. Yeah. Those two objectives are completely different. If that's the case, just put a shit ton of protein out and hope they stop by. Yeah. But that's why so many people want I call it the Amazon effect. They want the answer right now. They want to do this. They're like, well, I want to put this feed out and tomorrow he'd be bigger. It's like, he's already hard-horned. He can't do that.
Oh, yeah. No, it's definitely not a flip the switch type thing. And and that's why if you just look at one of our plants, we got 4 plants in Texas, but if you just look at one of our manufacturing facilities, we have over 300 different deer rations. I'm not saying that we floor stock all of them, but there's a lot from the customization standpoint of this is what your ranch needs. We've got so many different rations, and that just is because it depends on what your goals are. Like you're saying, if it's purely attraction, then we're probably going to go over here. If we're, wanting to grow bigger deer, but we've got exotics mixed in, then we can sit here and talk about all the different scenarios that come up. But literally, when I first started working in this field, we might have had 15 different rations, maybe 20, and that's breeder rations, everything. Wow. And it's just in the course of, and it continues to go up because, like I said, every ranch is different. Just because, even if the guy across the road from you is doing a certain thing, that does not mean it's going to work on your place. Right. Because how your place is managed and how his is completely different things, the herd dynamics, the size, water, habitat, all of that. Absolutely. So whatever you're using for a supplemental feed, you have to take that into consideration. I'm not saying you can't just go buy the most expensive feed, put it out there and see some pretty decent results, but I like my money to work for me. So I want to put it where it's most well spent, the most cost effective way. And that's kind of how we differentiate ourselves from a lot of the other people too, is we don't just say, hey, feed this because XYZ ranch down the road grew a 250-inch deer. If you feed it, you're going to get it too. By the way, it's $20 a sack. Right. No, I'm going to say this is the ration you need. It's a 16% protein, 3% fat, because that's all you need. You got good habitat. Your numbers are right. And then when we get to the fall, we might drop it down to a 14%, depending on what your harvest is going to be. That's a conversation I have every time I get onto a ranch.
So that kind of leads into, I guess, what we titled this podcast is building that relationship. So can you kind of speak onto that? Because we've been kind of filming on and off for Record Rack for the past 5 or 6 years now, and I can tell you this, almost every ranch we went to film for, whether it was for a TDA promotion or just a highlight video, this is actually the first time we've actually met in person, I think. But I've heard your name at almost every place we went, whether it was in North Texas, South Texas. When they talked about the relationship that they built with Record Rack, it was, man, Bobby Deeds. Bobby Deeds. I'm like, man, I need to meet this guy.
Well, I hope it was all positive anyways. Right. But, that's like I was talking about, that's the difference. at the end of the day, I don't just want to sell a ranch feed. And that's how I try to train our guys, all of our sales guys. I mean, I lead our sales team on trying to teach guys how to talk to these. And most of them, they're kind of intimidated, when it comes to talking to anybody, especially if it's a high fence ranch or even a deer breeder's even worse. I don't know anything about deer. And that's okay. If you're a sales guy, one of our sales guys, especially the new ones that don't know anything about it, and the way we try to train them is, well, you're not there to sell them deer feed. You're there to figure out what's their biggest opportunity, or what's the biggest thing we could help them with, be more productive, or whatever.
Right.
So and do it more cost effectively as well. Because that's the difference. And when they see that and they see the genuine side of it, when I get onto a ranch, and anybody that I've ever called on the first time, I never really even talk about feed. We talk about your habitat, we talk about your herd, we talk about what your ranch goals are. And at the end of the day, if I don't think whatever ration that we have could help make them more productive, be like, you're dialed in, you don't need feed.
Right.
And I've told people that. Now, most of the time, that's not the case. Obviously, if deer are in captivity, we got to feed them. And definitely on high fence places, like I said, even in South Texas on high rainfall years, we've done research showing that where we take Grand Henyo or whatever, we looked at a bunch of native browses down there and sent them to our lab and looked at our different functional ingredients and how it improves digestibility in deer's rumen fluids. And so that's really how we know that, I can. Just because it's great right now, everything's fat, you were growing deer this big last year, we can add 10-15% to that just because we can make the habitat that more digestible.
Yeah, so when y'all are looking at that of going to natural habitat and sending that off to a lab, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a nutritionist. How does that work? Are y'all like breaking the plant down by cells, or how does that work? Well,
that's another thing too, and that's kind of I'm just going to go ahead and make some more feed people mad, but another kind of trick some feed salesmen will try to do is, we need to take a sample of your habitat, then we're going to send it off, and we're going to design a feed that complements your habitat, and that's not how it works. I could take a sample of any ranch, where good, bad, or ugly, of everything out there that I know deer are going to eat, and send it off, and then I could come back a month later, take the same sample.
It's different.
It'll be completely different. So basically, we know what our average habitats are for different parts of the state. And then based off of rainfall, we typically adjust up or down protein, fat, major nutrient-wise, protein, fat, and fiber are the three main ones, what we need to be utilizing in the pellet. But just saying this supplement was designed for your ranch because I took a sample 3 years ago, a browse sample 3 years ago, and this is where it tested, well, that's could be completely different than what it is right now or what it is 3 months from now.
Right.
So, that's the biggest thing is don't fall into the easy traps or something that is just customized based off of something that happened 3 years ago. And that's what, like, part of if you're doing the same thing you were doing 20 years ago, if your habitat's not the same, your animals aren't the same, hopefully your genetics aren't the same, because that's where most people get, I guess, cliffed out, is where they think, well, I'm going to change my feed program and try to feed a deer that's genetically predisposed to be a 150-inch deer. That's all God ever is going to let him be.
Right.
But we're going to turn him into a 180. That you can't do that. It doesn't happen. So you got to start looking at the other ones, and that's whenever the relationship piece kind of comes in. Is I can kind of open. Well, heck, I never thought of that. Maybe I needed more water. We're not utilizing this part of our pasture. We got way too much brush. We got way too much prickly pear, too much. I mean, the things that, you learn being trained as a wildlife biologist that most people that are just feed salesmen got those blinders on, where I don't. I look at everything else, and then we look at the feed. Right.
Yeah, because I think, let's take this year. So right now we're filming it on the January 21st. And so, one, we'll talk about it, but we got a freeze coming up. But two, we had a lot of rain this year. Obviously, it was a flood, but I've heard good and bad things from deer nutrition and just the way they grew. Like on my personal property in Melvin, I killed a 21-inch wide deer, and we did have some supplemental feed. But again, my deal is just to keep them on my property versus off my neighbors.
Right.
But I saw more larger bodied and larger antlered deer this year, because I think, and over the past 3 or 4 years beforehand, we didn't get no rain almost. It's been in a major drought. So Have you had any experience with guys asking that this year with how much rain they've gotten? Because it's been substantially more over in 2025 than the past 5 years in total.
Depends on where you're at in the state.
Right.
I mean, some people are sitting here just high-fiving each other, and some are going, man, I can't keep a feeder full because these deer are starving to death.
Right.
So, like our property where you're talking about in Melvin isn't an hour east of there, and it's extremely dry right now. I mean, the thing about supplemental feed, if you're on a good program, you got peaks and valleys, right? And that's peaks and valleys are caused by the rainfall. That's what we're talking about. So all supplemental feed does is take those valleys out. That's what the goal is to try and level it out from a nutritional plane standpoint, and even providing a little bit from an attraction standpoint will help do that. Now, there's ranches, it depends on what you're feeding. There's ranches that it's basically going to swing with the rainfall. And no matter what they feed, man, we got a lot of rain. I had great horns, and I fed XYZ feed all year long. Then the next year it's a drought. Well, they ate a lot more feed, but man, they fell off hard.
Right.
If you're feeding a good feed, that shouldn't happen. I'm not saying antlers are always going to be tied to rainfall, no matter what you're feeding. They're always going to be bigger the more rain we get, typically. But when we do have those drought years, or it just turns off dry, especially in the antler growth part of the March through August,
right?
Anyways, whenever it turns off dry right there, and you're not feeding, you're feeding something that's, like I said, just a substitute for habitat, you just follow where the rain goes. Versus if you're feeding something that's balanced correctly, you don't see that big decline. You might see a less than 5% is what you should see.
That's a good way to put it. I'm very visual, so like just essentially filling in those gaps. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I wanted to ask is, if we're titling this "Building a Relationship," then relationships go both ways. Mm-hmm. So what's one thing from your standpoint, from a feed company, nutritionist, whatever? What's one thing that you wish your not employees, your customers? Mm-hmm. What's one thing you wish your customers would do more of?
Stay off Facebook, because I'm not kidding. Dr. Google and social media just I spend probably at least half the calls that I field are trying to talk somebody off of jumping off, just like I talked about everybody being early adopters and thinking, man, look at this deer and this is what they're doing. And I'm going, yeah, that's not going to work, and that's not why that deer's that big. But the biggest thing is just really consider the big picture, because there's no such thing as a silver bullet in when it comes to deer management, in my opinion. There's a lot of things that get sold as silver bullets, but there's not. There's not one functional ingredient that we're going to put in here that's going to give you 30 more inches. There's not one thing you could do to feed this. It's all cumulative.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing, is just looking for the easy button. There is no easy button when it comes to doing this.
Yeah, because I know a lot of guys, if there was an easy button, they'd push it 100 times a day.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then so let's kind of talk about it. I want to read something literally right before you came in. My wife sent it to me, but Abbott just announced with so Greg Abbott announced that he directed the Texas Division of Emergency Management to activate the State Emergency Response Resources. God, it's a mouthful. Ahead of potential winter weather impacts. Mm-hmm. So we're in Texas. That probably means we're going to get a half inch of ice, or not even a quarter inch of ice. And so everyone's going to freak out. People, you saw a wreck on the way here. Ice hasn't even got in. So what are people doing to prepare, or what should they be doing to prepare for, in what we call Texas, a winter that's coming?
Well, again, there's no easy button. So if you've been doing everything right, hopefully, we've just come out of the rut, but hopefully you're not waiting for your deer to start dying before you start feeding them. As long as your deer, or we're talking about whitetail right now, as long as your whitetail deer are in good body condition, they'll be fine. The cold don't bother them. Right. I've never seen a deer freeze to death in Texas unless he was stressed out, lost a lot of body condition, and it takes a lot to make a deer freeze to death unless he's just poor body condition. Then something else will typically get him, like respiratory pneumonia or something like that. So, so
you're saying fix it and prep, not post.
No, you need to have, you maintain body condition, period. That's the number one thing. When we go out into a ranch, if I see skinny does, skinny fawns, there's something not clicking nutritionally. So we want good body condition all the time. That's the number one thing I look at as a nutritionist, is body condition of deer, whether we're looking at deer exotics, it doesn't matter. So as long as our body condition is where it's supposed to be, events like this don't really trip them up. Now, exotics, not so much. I mean, there are some exotics that are extremely sensitive to cold weather.
Right. Like
we have black buck and oryx, and a lot of the Saharan type species that are sensitive to it, where it don't matter how fat they are. If you don't have, you better have some kind of a shelter for them. You need to be putting out, and it's not necessarily a feed thing. They don't need protein. Best thing you can do is feed them some kind of supplemental forage that they're going to consume.
Right.
Most of the time, that's just alfalfa. Is what a lot of people just dump as much alfalfa as you can put, and be sure you got some kind of windbreak for them. Cross your fingers. That's really all we can do, unless they're gentle enough you can put them inside the barn or something.
Go put them inside with your dog.
Yeah, but I mean, we typically can't, and there'll be some exotics lost out of this deal. Black buck and some of the Ginsbuck oryx.
Yeah, and
species.
Unfortunately, I think that's another thing that drove up in 2021 is the price of exotics, because I mean, so many died, and it's unfortunate, but it also drives cost, supply and demand.
Oh yeah,
and so it's hopefully, like you said, hopefully people are doing the right thing, and they've been feeding all year long, so they can be prepped for this. But I see that as well, because we quote unquote just take pictures, and so I don't get paid to go somewhere to have an opinion. I get paid there to go do their marketing, and so there's times where I just go, man, like, it's going to be hard to market this place because the deer look bad.
Right.
And so as much as I can, I'll tell them if they're receptive, but they paid me to come take pictures, whether they're alive or dead or on their last leg, and I'm going to do my job. But so many people think easy button, silver bullet, I'm just going to put one bag of 20% out and they're going to survive. And it's like, man, there's so much more that go into it, especially the exotics, like you said, God didn't design them to be here. It is the closest, in my opinion, the state of Texas is the closest to Africa in general.
Oh, yeah.
Under a certain area of North Texas. And that's why there's people in North Texas that have other exotics, but man, you get up there close to the Oklahoma border, man, that's why there's not a ton of access up there. There's not a ton of black buck up there.
Now, there's a reason there's not high fence exotic ranches in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to make it.
Absolutely.
So, and just the short-haired varieties of most of them, though, they just can't. A little short snap they can, but when it comes to below freezing, 48 hours or more, then we're going to start found a few that we got to push off in a ditch. So
yeah, and that's we've had other people on, and we're going to have them more on this year, but there's so much that goes into antler development, body condition that's outside of feed. That's just the husbandry side of it.
Oh, yeah.
And especially breeders. Like, we go to places that they've got tens of millions of dollars in exotics, but they probably have tens of millions of dollars in infrastructure and concrete water troughs and ways to drain it even if it does freeze, and other ways that they think, versus there's always that easy button. Just put a kiddie pool out there and fill it up with water when it gets empty, and so. But yeah, I think that's one of the big misconceptions is an easy button.
Yeah.
And
if you're worried about everything making it right now, and I mean 2 days before, and your deer in poor body condition, thinking you're just going to go throw some hay out there and they're going to survive, it's not going to work that good. So it just like me or you, if we weren't in good shape and expected you to survive out in those kind of conditions, it's not fair to think that the feed can do it either. So, like I said, it's all cumulative and not just flip a switch.
Yeah. So, excluding the freeze, what would be a recommendation, whether if people have whitetails and exotics on their property, should they keep them separate and have two different feed programs, or should they intermingle them, or what's your opinion on that?
I mean, obviously do it both ways, but to do it as cost effectively as possible and to get the best result, to make your whitetail as big as they can possibly be without eating you out of house and home. Yeah, I do recommend segregating them, but a lot of people don't have the country or the fencing or the feed bins, because you got to feed two different rations in too. If you're not going to feed two different rations to them, there's no point in segregating them anyways.
Right.
But there's a lot of ranches where I don't see them fall off that much with the genetics on most of those places where they're combining them now. It's really the number one, I guess, problem most of those places have where they do keep them commingled is too many animals.
Right.
If you're going to put exotics onto a ranch, that's probably the number one thing I would recommend to people. That the biggest hole I see people fall into when they want to put exotics on their ranch is they think they can still carry the same amount of whitetail and still get them as big as they're genetically predisposed to be. And that doesn't happen. They're all competing for resources, whether it's, we can put feed out and carry more animals on a property, but once we get to a certain threshold, we're going to start competing for resources, and limited resources, limited production. So that's the number one thing. If you're going to bring in more animals, then those animals, it all has to balance to whatever your carrying capacity is, and put that front of mind versus the total number of animals you want on your ranch. Or you're going to be calling me in about 5 years going, there's nothing left standing on my ranch. We got a cold snap coming in 2 days. And what do I need to do? And I'd be like, well, pray. That's all I can tell you, because there's nothing you can do. So, because if you don't have cover, habitat, and have done all the work, then they're just going to be standing out there in the cold. And you're going to, the carrying capacity piece will take care of itself. Right.
Absolutely. So what is the biggest difference between the feed for whitetail and exotics?
Mainly the nutrient density. Exotics do a really, most of those exotics come from, sub-Saharan type stuff where it's basically rock, sand, and
barren
dirt, nothing. So they do a really good job. There are some concentrate selector type exotics, don't get me wrong, that are like whitetail, but the majority of them are in that intermediate to grazer type category, which means that they're closer to sheep and cattle.
Right.
So they can do a lot better with a lot lower nutrient density. So they don't need as high protein. They don't need the really high mineral content that we put in there. Now, functionally, they're still a ruminant. We still use a lot of the same functional ingredients that help improve rumen efficiency and things like that. You just don't need the nutrient density, because like we talked about the 20 and 16 with whitetail, it's the same with exotics, except you're talking about 16 and 14 or sometimes even 12% protein with them. And then the mineral profile, some depending on the species, like bongo and some other ones have different coppers and things. They're all different, basically, from a mineral standpoint. But the biggest difference between them is you don't have to feed as nutrient dense of a ration to an exotic as you do a whitetail to get them to perform at their peak.
Right. And so with those people, and again, I'm asking out of ignorance because it's been a while since I've had to feed my own animals, but is one of the biggest components, like with the sheeps and goats and stuff, is that a big copper component?
Well, a lot of people think, they hear exotic and they think, well, they're all copper sensitive. That's not right. The only thing that's copper sensitive are sheep species. So Transcaspians, Aoudad, any type of, the sheep, the sure enough sheep species, those are the ones that have a copper sensitivity problem, which means, and when I say copper, that your ration shouldn't have over 20 parts per million copper if you're feeding a sheep species on your ranch, because some can tolerate more than others, but it's what happens is that stuff accumulates in the liver, then it dumps, their kidneys shut down, and they die. So, but some can, I know some people that had too many Aoudad, couldn't get rid of them, didn't want to get a helicopter to do it. So they tried to use copper to do it, and they couldn't kill them.
You can't kill Aoudad unless it's got a lead bullet in it.
Well, then I've had guys go buy like this stud 36-inch ram and then go buy something that's 40 parts per million copper, and he's dead in a week. And who knows whether it was the copper that did it or not, but it could. So, but they are copper sensitive, but it's just the sheep species on the exotics. Everything else actually has a copper requirement, and so do sheep. Actually, sheep actually have like 12, 13 part per million copper requirement, but it can't. Once you get over 20, that's when you can start running into trouble. But everything else on the exotic side, their mineral requirement from a trace mineral standpoint, we typically, whitetail and exotic isn't that much different. The cow phos is a little bit different, but it's mainly just the major nutrients that vary in those rations.
Yeah, and so you kind of talked about the legs earlier, because I think a lot of our listeners and stuff, they are ranch hands, ranch owners, somehow involved in the exotic whitetail industry, which now all have pedigrees. So how much, you touched on a little bit, but I want to see a little more in depth of what plays a bigger role, or the equal, or what parts are they with genetics versus feed? We're interrupting the podcast to let you know that you personally could sponsor Droptine Studios Podcast. If you're interested in seeing what sponsorship opportunities we have, go to droptinestudios.com/podcast, and people can hear about you, your business, or your services. Thank you, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
I mean, nutrition will only get you so far. I mean, what your genetic ceiling is whatever Mother Nature gave you to deal with. You're not going to change that. The only way you're going to change that's changing the genetic profile of your herd. And Some people think you can do that with culling, and you could put 3 different biologists right here, and they would all have a different opinion on whether or not that works or not. My opinion, yeah, it does to a certain point, particularly if you're under high fence. But you still are managing the genetic profile of what's on that property, and it's going to plateau at a certain point. Now, once you get to that point, and you got to have your nutrition dialed in to even get to that. But once you get to that point, you're going to have to change that genetic profile of the herd, whether it's exotic or whitetail, and that means inputting some different genetics into that ranch if you want to get them bigger. Some people are happy where they're at, and they just want them to stay good body condition. They may want more of them, which we can, a lot of times we can figure out how to solve that problem. But as far as making them bigger, the only person that can do that is God.
Yeah. Yeah, and it all ties back to marketing, because you'll hear some people that go, genetics can only do so much, use your feed. The other one says feed's only so much. And again, good for people for selling what they have, but I'll probably ask any and everyone. So, also, if you're a feed company and you want to come on here and talk, holler at me, droptinestudios.com/podcast. But, that's what I'm doing this for, just trying to have there's nothing like this in this industry, right? Like even 20 years in the grand scheme of things of how long Record Rack's been going under Cargill.
Right.
It's really not that long. And there's really not a lot of educational platforms for people to come on and talk that are consistently doing it. And so I want to have people on that have the same opinions as me, as different opinions as me. Hell, one day I'll have 4 different feed companies up here, and I'll sit on that side, and I'll just throw questions at y'all and let y'all argue back and forth. So
you might start a fist fight if you ain't careful.
No doubt. We'll put little dividers between.
You got to do something.
But yeah, I think it'll be fun, and I want to have that, because I think, again, there's certain people who are just salesmen, whether I know who they are or not, but there's certain people who are just really good at selling.
Right.
But I also feel like if you're really good at selling and you're really good at marketing, that doesn't mean your product's good. And there's other people, just because your product's good and you're not good at selling it, it doesn't mean one's better than the other. It's just the same thing with a feed program on a ranch or any program on any business. What is your objective? Is your objective to sell as many bags and as many tons and as many things and take as many other people from other companies? Cool. Then say whatever you have to say to sell it. But if you're going to sell a good product, I used to breed whitetail. We fed Record Rack, and I did that before we even worked together. But there was a guy, this was a double down video, but I've done the same thing. And so that's why marketing's good. They put all the different feeds out, and they posted the video of the bucks on their low fence ranch, or whatever it was, eating each one. But I did the same thing in my pens, and I put out 5 different feeds, and they ate Record Rack first. Now, this was 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it doesn't matter. But ultimately, it's good marketing, whether I agree with it or not, but it's good marketing that they put it out there and do it. Now, was that the first video they posted? Was it the 8th video they posted? I don't know. But for me and for other clients, because I know clients that feed Record Rack and clients who don't, but ultimately it's like what you said earlier, is what do your animals on your place, what do they like and what do they need?
Well, I like to hit on that side-by-side deal. I've been doing this for a long time, and that was, like you said, marketing-wise, it's powerful. You can do that and put feed next to each other. And palatability, like I said, is important. That's one of the number one things that we worry before we make a change in anything. I check the palatability, be sure we didn't knock it off or at least negate it.
Right.
So we want intake. But, and people talk about TDN and intake and all this other stuff. I can take a 50-pound sack of corn and put it next to anybody's protein, and what are the deer going to eat?
The candy, the corn.
They're going to eat the corn,
100%.
Right? So if you're just going to make your decision based off of intake, no, because obviously they don't have nutritional wisdom. If they did, they wouldn't be sitting there. It's like putting a pile of Snickers bars and a 4-course meal in front of your kid.
Right.
They're going to go for the candy every time.
100%.
So deer are the same way. So just because you're putting 2 feeds out next to each other, one of them might be loaded with grain, and they love it. And you can load a feed up with grain and still hit all the nutrient guarantees on a tag. That doesn't mean that they're going to consistently come in there and eat it all the time. And you can get away with a lot of times in a pasture situation. There's a lot of feed companies that do this, load their feed up with a lot of grain, because grain's cheap. That's how they pad their margins. So where that's one of the things at Record Rack we don't do. It's called NFC. It's non-fat carbohydrates. It's a measure of starch. So we max that into all of our rations, so we can only put so much grain into it, because you put a certain amount of grain into a rumen, it lowers the pH, deer can become acidotic, and it can kill them. But if it doesn't kill them, it at least stresses them out so that respiratory pneumonia, predators, whatever, can. So that's the main thing, or the main difference is, it's not just about intake. It's about the total, what's going on physiologically in that animal after they consume it, not just about how many pounds of feed will that deer eat, which very rarely do we get beat. I'm not saying you can't put a high grain ration next to ours and they might consume more of that one than this one, but I guarantee you, if you took two pastures that were genetically identical versus high grain ration versus record rack, we're going to beat you performance-wise.
Yeah. Yeah, so what are some other things that Record Rack does outside of feed? Like, you can deliver feed, anybody can get a truck, anybody can go fill bins. What are other things building relationship-wise, I guess, or outside of that Record Rack's doing?
It's just the general information piece of it, because everybody's got a problem, basically, on their ranch, or a certain unmet need. Most time they don't even know it. But being able to, myself, my counterpart, Gus Duncan, who does the exact same thing I do, getting on the ranches, and even several of our sales reps have been around long enough now. They know as much about this stuff as anybody. So being able to have the boots on the ground that we have, and not just in Texas, across the country, being able to get somebody out onto your ranch and actually just, the guys that don't know anything, I'm just like, you ask questions, you take notes, and everybody has, here's the basic, what we need to know, and then we'll figure out what we can solve. Right. So that's the main thing, is just getting somebody with their eyes on it, or at least they'll answer the phone and talk to you about, what are your goals? What do you want to do? Or you want cheaper feed? You want more deer? You want what's going on? Right. So not just going into I'm not saying going into a feed store and trying to figure this out isn't possible, but having people that this is what we do. Right. Is all we do. Right. And having myself, and I'm not going to hate to ring our own bell, but two of the best wildlife biologists in the country that are at your disposal, basically, to answer questions that most feed companies that just want you to buy more tons won't have a clue about. Right.
Well, and especially a lot of our clients, and anyone in general, really, it's a business. And so you have to make, because $1 to $3, $5 a bag or per pound or whatever makes a huge difference if you're actually running a proper feed program. And so when we ask people, either on or off camera, I'm just like, why do you really feed Record Rack? What are you doing? And they're like, like you said, anybody can make feed. But ultimately they go, it's cost effective. They go, now it's cost effective and we have these resources. So that's why they do it. And so to me, that's, again, one subsect of what's your objective for your business or your ranch or whatever it is. What's your objective? Most people want to turn a profit. So how do you turn a profit? Lower your costs.
Yep.
So that seems pretty A plus B equals C to me.
It is. And, pretty much every commercial hunting operation that I deal with, that's what we talk about is, well, I really think we could feed, we stick with 16 year round, or even if this deer and exotic pasture over here, we're not really worried. These are released deer or whatever. They're already growed out. We don't need a 16. We feed a 14% because that's going to be all your exotics need to maintain body condition for them. So yeah, helping them design a plant where they were feeding a 20% protein to stuff like that, just figuring out where the opportunities are, where you're throwing nutrition on the ground, whether it was ours or somebody else's. Most of the time I can find stuff, we're not the only people that know how to make feed, but I can find a hole in some kind of ration that's probably causing an issue. And that's what'll blow your hat off, is a lot of these places you get on are creating issues by supplementally feeding. Wrap your head around that.
Yeah. Do you have like a real world example of that?
Again, feeding like these high grain rations. If they're feeding a feed that they saw, XYZ ranch growing these big deer with, and now their population dynamics are wrong, their buck doe ratio is off. So their bucks are going to really have to work hard to get all the does bred, because a doe's going to cycle 4, 5, 6 times. A lot of people think they just cycle once. If they get missed, that's not correct. They've done the research to prove that's not accurate. So those does are going to keep cycling until the bucks get them bred. And if it takes if they rut for 2 or 3 months, and then they've got all they got to eat, if their habitat's depleted and all they got to eat is a high grain ration, you might as well feed them lead, because that high grain ration is going to make them acidotic and die. I don't know how many places have called that have been on, I'm not going to throw anybody under a bus, but have been on the wrong kind of ration, or a ration that has too much starch in it, and be like, man, my bucks are dying. They're not rutting anyway. This is in maybe we're in March. I mean, they should be dropping their antlers. And they're not doing anything but eating feed. But it's because that ration is balanced incorrectly, and it's got a lot of grain in it. Starch level running around 50%. Like I said, acidotic, pH drops, they're dead.
Man, is there a certain point where people can see that and switch, or how long does it take once you switch nutrition?
I mean, a lot of people, that's another one is kind of a bone in my cross since I've started selling feed is, well, I don't want to switch right now because my does are in their third trimester. My bucks are fixing to drop their antlers. It's 57 degrees today. I've heard every kind of reason for not wanting to switch.
It's all BS.
It's all. If you're switching to something that's better nutritionally, when would you make a switch? Today, now,
at dinner.
Don't wait. And a lot of people think you need to take it. And animals in captivity in a pen, a lot of times we'll take a transition, 7 to 10 day transition period where I recommend kind of mixing whatever I'm going to tell you to feed with whatever you were feeding. In a pasture, no. If we're going to something that's got a more balanced, starch matrix to it, it's just as palatable. I mean, nutrient profile wise, that's the other thing too. Everybody thinks that there's so many different silver bullets in deer feed or in feed period. We all have access to the same commodities as feed companies. It's how you compound those commodities is what makes the difference. So that's where the holes typically are, because you can compound different commodities and have a ration that costs $200, and you can have one that costs $400 for the feed company to make, but the tags are identical. But this $200 ration has 50% ground grain in it. This one only allows 25. This is going to kill your deer when they're post-rut, stressed out. This is going to make them gain weight.
So if they can't just read the label, if it's going to be pretty much identical, what's the solution?
Well, that's where you got to get a hold of a nutritionist. I mean, and a sure enough nutritionist. Now, This is Texas. There's a wildlife biologist and a deer nutritionist on every corner if you just ask them.
Right.
Or you get on Google or Facebook again.
Right.
And, you're going to find all the nutritional wisdom that you need. But get hooked up with somebody, like you talked about, the relationship piece, that you trust and that isn't going to fill you full of BS. And that's the number one thing. Because then, before I say anything, I've got almost every feed that's out there, I've had it analyzed. So I can tell you pretty much whether or not, that can't be it in that feed. I don't know. There's something else going on. But find a nutritionist that can actually look into, you have to send the feed off to a lab and get it analyzed first, because we're not just talking about TDN and basic antiquated. I mean, that's a nutritional value from 50 years ago that doesn't really, I see it so many times. The reason I just keep saying TDN is because so many people just hang their hat on it, and it doesn't even translate well to whitetail deer exotics. I mean, TDN is like, this was the best example. Whole corn, 85, 88% TDN, higher than anything else out there, where a good balanced ration should be running 70-ish, somewhere in there. So, but again, if it was just TDN, then why wouldn't I just feed whole corn all the time?
Right.
So that's where a lot of people get lost, is just trying to figure out, well, the TDN's higher on this one versus that one. It's got to be better. Well, no, that's the case. We'd be feeding corn to everything. So figuring out what nutrient variable, and again, the nutrients that could be deficient are typically what could be causing a problem. If they have a reproductive problem, hair coat issues, mass issues with their bucks, I mean, whatever, hoof quality issues, you name it. Everybody's got whatever problem.
Yeah.
But that can be addressed by it just depends on what the problem is. It could be a mineral issue, it could be an energy issue, it could be a starch issue. None of the above, but most of the time they're going to be like, well, we just need to feed a better feed.
Right.
And that's typically not the case.
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying earlier reminded me of the saying that if hard work could pay for something, the donkey would own the ranch. That's like, well, yeah, that's damn sure not right, because there's a lot of other things that have to go into it. And I think, to me, I know you won't say it, so it's not on the company's name, but I'll put it on my company's name. It sounds like the biggest problem is people are lazy. And I'll say that as by Droptine Studios, not anyone else. But people just want the silver bullet. Maybe we should title this Silver Bullet Easy Button, but like they want that. But to me, that's where and again, I'm always going to tie it back to what I know, which is the marketing, is going, there's been a lot of people that have tried to come in and freelancers and whatever, and they just come in and they think it's fun because you get to see animals and go here and there. But ultimately, it gets hard. And so you're buying assurance, whether it's with a marketing company that's been around for however long we have been, or a feed company that's not just a fly-by-night, what we would call freelancers. So, I mean, that would be the point, is if you want to be lazy, just call someone who's already done the work and just tell them, this is what you need to do. We've already done the research.
Yeah, I mean, to take, again, not trying to throw anybody else under a bus, but to be taking somebody's word about what you should be doing with your ranch when they don't even own a feed mill, have a nutritional lab, have any kind of a database based off of research. We have tons of in vitro data based off of different ingredients. That wasn't done with cattle, sheep, or goats, or something that you could Google. This is proprietary stuff we did at our research facility in Elk River. And I mean, that's versus somebody that has a good Facebook page,
right?
And say, okay, yeah, I'm going to feed that versus feed this. It's just
right. Yeah. Well, and also we're now working together to doing social media and everything. That is why you're here, but that's because of our relationship, not because you pay us. And so I want to make that clear to anyone listening. But I think that's one thing that we'll go talk about at lunch. That's not on record, but working on this video project we're working for y'all. I want to see that, of how to integrate it. So hopefully through that video, people can know with what we can say of, here's the research, or the brand video of here's why we're different. And yes, you talk to a dentist, he's going to find a cavity. You talk to a marketing guy, I'm going to tell you to market more. But when you go through and you have that resource to be able to send to people, that just hopefully saves you phone calls. Hey, watch this 3-4 minute video, whatever we're going to make it, being like, hopefully this answers most of your questions. Now, how can I consolidate it?
Right.
But I just think a lot of people, one, are lazy and don't care, but two, don't know.
Right.
It's like if they can know and see what all research y'all have done, and I'm saying this because I don't know yet, but even at lunch, I'm going to get educated of just learning more about it.
Right.
And then maybe after the video comes out, we'll have a second podcast and go a little more in detail, but I'm really excited to put that out, because I think the longer we've been talking and learning about it, the more excited I am about doing it, because I think there's so much more than what people know, because I think they literally just think, make feed, put it out.
Right.
And it's like, that's no way, that's not an educated decision.
No, and it's pretty common. You know, that's, everybody thinks that's the easy button, is, well, I'm going to feed protein this year, and then come to find out, well, I got a $20,000 feed bill, and my average Boone and Crockett score and field dress weights are exactly the same.
Right.
That's a pretty common problem. And that, that's a big part of why I'm here too, is in the 20 years that I've been with Record Rack, one thing we've done an excellent, or the best job at, what we're good at, is the nutrition piece. We're great at being the leader, and I mean, we push energy levels higher than anybody ever did when they said you can't do that with deer. A lot of the chelated trace minerals, all the buzzwords, yeast, probiotics, prebiotics, anything that you're going to hear as a buzzword from another feed company is something we started 20 years ago. So doing that is what we're great at. Being the first guy through the wall, because we've done the research and we know that this is going to work, and if you spend your money on this, you're going to get a return. Versus the marketing side, we haven't been very good at that.
Right.
So being able to collect credit for the work and what we've done to get to this point is really what, our biggest opportunity, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, and, there's a lot of people that I've been working with directly, but there's only one me.
Right.
And there's only, I talk to 20 people a day that I haven't talked to before about nutrition or whatever.
Right.
But being able to get that message out, has been something that's our greatest opportunity, and hopefully that's what you're going to help us with.
Oh, hopefully we can. I know we're just getting our toes wet, but hopefully we'll be able to jump in soon. But with that, what are you most excited about in the wildlife nutrition area that's just coming up in the future?
Man, the thing that keeps me stoked is the fact that we don't know everything. I mean, if you're buying some feed from somebody, so this is the only feed you're ever going to need to feed, this is the best feed because I say so, and you're buying feed from the wrong person. So the thing that most fired up about the feed industry is the change. I mean, I love being able to just figure out something new. Now, I'm not saying we just spitball and throw stuff into a ration. It's the fact that we've got over 100 years of nutritional data with domestic livestock, right? We're scratching the surface with during exotics. So anybody that says that we don't know a lot of the things, especially for exotics, what the zinc and copper requirement is for an Inyala.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I mean, that's something that we're going to continually learn about versus sheep, goats, cows. That stuff gets kind of boring in my opinion versus my job. We could find the next big thing tomorrow.
Right.
Now, it's funny, the next big thing being something that, like I said, nutrition is cumulative. It's just something that moves the bar this much.
Right.
But a lot of our competitors or feed companies that are out there, okay, well, the next big thing is this, and it's going to give you 30. It's just not, that's not true. I'm not saying that's what keeps me going. I'm just saying the fact that we can continually learn and continue to be a leader in this industry is what I'm most fired up about.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was this will be one last thing because this wasn't even on here, but that made me think. And I don't know how much you can or can't say or what research, but I've heard a little bit about feed programs and it sounded like a common misconception earlier, but like when, let's say, it's fallow or whitetail or exotics are pregnant, if that aspect of or if you're going to go into AI, I've heard people say, well, we take them off this feed and do this feed before we go in here so they have better conception rates. Is there any data that is saying that's true or not?
Outside of red deer and fallow, not much, and that's extremely limited with those species. I will say that, you need to be working with a nutritionist when it comes to your AI program, and it all ties back to body condition, basically. If you look at other species, deer and exotics are no different when it comes to body condition. If you get them overly conditioned, your repro success goes backwards.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard doctors while the fallow are up there these deer are too fat. Yeah.
Now you never thought you would be able to get them too fat, but you can.
Right.
I mean, they've proven it, and like I said, every other species, deer and exotics are no different. So you need to be working with first of all, that's where your manager comes in too. I mean, your manager has to have an eye for that and be like, man, we're about 30 days out from AI. We might need to suck these girls back a little bit.
Right.
Or, we're kind of thin. These fawns we're fixing to wean, but man, these does are thin. We might need to pump up our energy level. So having a manager, first of all, that can recognize that knows that, educated to the point that they know that, and then that manager having a relationship with a nutritionist that can say, okay, well, here's what we can do in 45 days, those animals are going to look different.
Right.
So that's kind of where all the magic happens, is you have to have that relationship piece if you want to be successful in this industry, because if you just take Jim Bob's word for it that this is what's going to happen when you feed this feed, and he's not a nutritionist and basically he don't have a damn clue,
right,
you're going to wind up in a wreck.
One outfit, one way of doing business. Arns Ranch and Wildlife runs cattle, manages native and exotic wildlife, and hunts with intention. From pasture gates to profit margins, they don't just manage your land, they elevate it. Contact Arns Ranch and Wildlife. They're built for ranchers and hunters that work. We are really good at our job. We just happen to sell convenience. If you're looking for someone to help run your business, whether it's social media, rebuild your website, whatever it may be, contact us today at droptinestudios.com. Well, man, I think we talked about most everything. So before I get to my conclusion, is there anything that a last minute you want to mention if someone's watching this, if kind of knowing our target audience is the ranch and whitetail and exotics, is there anything you want to throw out there? I
mean, just like all the tips that I say, give us a call. I mean, we're that's why we're here. That's why I love my job. I'm not a feed salesman. I'm here to help people. I've been truly blessed to find a job that not only that it's something that I'm passionate about, but it's something where I'm not just a used car salesman or get an insurance agent. I actually get to go help somebody figure out a problem, address it nutritionally, or if I can't, I'll say, ain't a nutrition problem, but it's something else going on. So that's the biggest thing, is don't be afraid to reach out to us. And if, like I said, if we can't help you, I'm not going to say we can.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing, is don't be afraid to reach out to us, because just because we're a big company doesn't mean we can't get boots on the ground and come see you.
And what would be the best way for someone to reach? I know you probably don't want to put your cell phone number since it's ringing all the time, but do they just go to recordrack.com or?
Yeah, most of the online stuff is how you get it. You can just hit us up through our inquiry deal, and then we have several people that depending on where you're at in the country, they'll delegate that out to whoever the head guy is. Obviously, anything in Texas is going to come to myself or Gus Duncan. So that would be the number one thing. Or if you are in Texas, I'll give you my number. You can call me if you're in Texas. But it's
you want to toss it out there?
Yeah, no, I will. My number's 325-451-0030. And like I said, it rings all the time, so you're not going to bug me if you call me. But yeah, be sure you leave a message though, because a lot of times I am out of cell service.
Right. Well, Bobby, I appreciate it. I'm glad this is happening, and I'm glad we're going to be able to. We'll go grab lunch and let you get back on the road. But yeah, I foresee this not being our only one. So hopefully we'll get more people on here, whether you're a feed company, a supplement company, or anybody else. I'd love to have you on and just pick your brain, let you give your piece. So thank you for taking a listen. And again, if you want to be a guest or want to have a guest on here that you want to recommend, you can go to droptinestudios.com/podcast, and you can submit an inquiry or whatever you want. But also, you can be a sponsor if you want. So if you want to be a sponsor of this podcast, again, we're not big. I'm not Joe Rogan, but we have a lot of people who want to come on. So we look forward to it. And again, thank you, Bobby.
Hey, thank you for having me.